Hi and welcome to my third video in the series about nutrition, and today we're going to be looking at BMI and obesity. So BMI stands for Body Mass Index, and it's a measurement of essentially how overweight or underweight they are. Unfortunately, it's not particularly reliable. It can be a guideline, and it's a reasonable guideline for an average person. Where it can fall down is where you have extreme body types. It's also not a particularly reliable method for checking weight of children, and it can fall down, like I said, when people have extreme body types. So for instance, if you were a prop forward or a rugby player, then you could expect to have a high BMI, which might say that you're overweight, but that hasn't taken into account your muscle mass, and so these values can be skewed. It's meant to be viewed as a generalisation rather than an accurate diagnosis. So most values for BMI are calculated like this. So it's mass over your height squared, and the units for mass are kilogram and the unit for height is metres. Generally speaking, this comes out, you have values ranging from 15 and in some cases up to 50. Essentially anything below 18.5 is considered underweight, 18.5 to 25 is considered normal weight, 25 to 30 is overweight, 30 to 35 is obese, and then you start getting into categories of morbidly obese once you reach over 35. So if we go to have a look at some examples now, and so these are actual values for these specific sportsmen. So Jonah Lomu, for instance, his height is 1.96 and his weight is 124 kilos. So that would be 124 divided by 1.96 squared. With the footballer Wayne Rooney, it would be 78 divided by 1.78 squared. Paula Radcliffe, 54 divided by 1.73 squared. Eva Longoria would be 48 over 1.57 squared, and David Beckham would be 75 divided by 1.83 squared. And you come up with the following values. So for this, Jonah Lomu would be in the obese category because he'd be in the 30s. Wayne Rooney would be in what you'd expect the normal range, as would David Beckham. Paula Radcliffe would be considered underweight, and Eva Longoria would be within the normal range. Now, obviously, these are extremes because you have Paula Radcliffe, who's clearly healthy or of a healthy weight to run things like marathons and the 10,000 metres, but because her mass is quite low, because she's quite lean, obviously the BMI possibly isn't valid. For Jonah Lomu, obviously he's reasonably large, and therefore his BMI is quite high. Again, BMI is probably only really reliable for non-sportsmen in general, and it's just a guide. But it enables a general check for most people to see whether they're overweight or not, and whether they potentially need to either gain or to lose some weight. So obesity is a measure of how overweight somebody is, and it can be measured using the BMI scale. And so anything with a value of above 30 we consider to be obese, and usually it's one of the first checks that, for instance, if you wanted to find out you're obese, it's a specific check that you do, so you'd look at the BMI. The problem is it doesn't take into account things like muscle mass. It also doesn't take into account the type of sports that you're doing or the conditioning you need to be in order to perform those sports. And so you can find extremes, hence Jonah Lomu and Paula Radcliffe, who would be actually healthy but have extremely high and low BMIs. Possibly a better way to measure these people would be to actually check the percentage of body fat by using calipers, which are basically essentially pieces of equipment which basically grip the skin, and they can measure how much adipose or fat tissue is contained at different locations around your body. And so, in summary, BMI is a measure of how underweight or overweight somebody is. It's measured by taking their weight and dividing it by the height squared. A value of below 18.5 is considered underweight, from 18.5 to 25 is considered normal, 25 to 30 is overweight, and 30 plus is obese. There's actually some extra categories on top that obese is divided into, but we won't look at those today. And effectively, it's not always necessarily the best method to measure whether someone's underweight or overweight, particularly if they're a sportsman, because it doesn't take into account different types of body type or muscle mass.